Alright, I think everything is set now. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. So today I'd like to talk about the Nuremberg War Trials that occurred in the aftermath of World War II. And the trials were held from November 20th, 1945 to October 1st, 1946. So I will be talking about the trials, the people involved with the trials, and the outcome of the trials. So first and foremost, the Nuremberg trials were held by Allies against representatives of Nazi Germany for plotting and carrying out invasions of other countries and other crimes during World War II. As said, the trials took place from November 20th, 1945 to October 1st, 1946, and were held in Nuremberg, Germany at the Palace of Justice. So the trials were a series of military tribunals held after World War II to prosecute prominent leaders of Nazi Germany. As said before, they were held in Nuremberg, Germany from November 20th, 1945 to October 1st, 1946, and were designed to hold these individuals responsible for their role in the war's atrocities, including crimes against humanity and war crimes. The trials were significant in international law and justice as they were established the principle of individual accountability, and they paved the way for future war crimes trials. Now, despite concerns about the trial's fairness and legitimacy, they remain a crucial moment in international law and justice and continue to be studied and debated today. So the Nuremberg trials also resulted in the creation of the International Military Tribunal, or the IMT, and the International Criminal Court, which continue to hold individuals accountable for war crimes and other offenses against the international law, which I will be getting more into at the end of this presentation. So just for a quick timeline of the trials. So the trials began on November 20th, 1945, and the trials that would later become known as the Nuremberg trials then began on that day. So this marked the first time in history that an international tribunal was convened to prosecute crimes against humanity, again adding to why it is such an important thing in history. Now, from December 9th to the 29th of 1946, the International Military Tribunal, or the IMT, was established to try 22 of the most important leaders of Nazi Germany. The trial was conducted by judges from the Allied powers and was intended to bring justice to the millions of people who were killed during the Holocaust. From April 14th to August 31st during 1947, following the IMT trial, judges from the Allied powers conducted 12 subsequent trials, in which 177 other German officials and military personnel were tried for the involvement in the atrocities committed during World War II. These trials were held in Nuremberg and were a critical step in the process of bringing those responsible to justice. On October 1st, 1946, the IMT passed judgment on the 22 defendants tried during the first trial, which was a historic moment. This moment is marked the first time that leaders of a country were held accountable for their actions on the world stage. On October 16, 1946, the sentences were handed down for the 22 defendants tried during the IMT trial. 12 defendants were sentenced to death, 3 to life imprisonment, and 4 to lesser terms. This was a significant moment in the history of international law, as it demonstrated that even the most powerful leaders are not above the law. Now for some background information, including information on World War II and kind of the reasons this trial came about. So the Second World War was one of the most devastating global conflicts in history, lasting from 1939 to 1945. This catastrophic event resulted in the deaths of millions of people, the majority of whom were civilians, unfortunately. The war was characterized by immense destruction, suffering, and widespread atrocities, with the Nazi regime being responsible for some of the most horrible acts in human history. The Nazis, who were led by Adolf Hitler, believed in a warped ideology that emphasized the superiority of the Aryan race and the need for their complete domination over other races. They implemented policies that led to the persecution and murder of millions of Jews, Roma, homosexuals, disabled individuals, and political dissidents. The systematic extermination of Jews, known as the Holocaust, was one of the most horrific aspects of the war. In response to these atrocities, however, the Allied powers, which includes the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union, came together to defeat the Axis powers, which included Germany, Italy, and Japan. The Allied powers were committed to bringing the Nazi leaders to justice and ensuring that such atrocities would never be repeated. The trials, held in Germany during 1945 to 1946, were a key part of this effort as they prosecuted high-ranking Nazi officials for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Overall, World War II and the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime were a turning point in human history, leading to significant changes in international relations, human rights, and the pursuit of justice. So for the method or the format of the trial, the format was a mix of legal traditions. There were prosecutors and defense attorneys according to British and American law. However, the decisions and sentences were imposed by a tribunal or a panel of judges rather than a single judge or jury. So there are four main legal principles that emerged from the trials. This included, first noted, individual criminal accountability for crimes under international law, an end to impunity, equality before the law, and fair trial rights. These principles were universally recognized and became known as the Nuremberg Principles. So the military tribunal, which we had mentioned before, was established and became a major step towards holding those responsible for atrocities committed during World War II. And the selection of judges and prosecutors was also a key factor in ensuring that the tribunal was able to carry out its duties with integrity and impartiality. So during the war trials, the IMT tried high-ranking officials from Nazi Germany for war crimes, crimes against peace, and crimes against humanity. The trial proceedings, the tribunal was made up of judges from various countries who were tasked with ensuring a fair and impartial trial. Now, before I introduce you to the people of the trials, which includes judges, chief prosecutors, defendants, and organizations, I would like to note that the individuals involved in the war trials are important to know about because they were held accountable for their actions during World War II, and the trials established the principle of individual accountability for war crimes and crimes against humanity, which paved the way for future war crimes trials. So the verdicts and sentences handed down by the tribunal were meant to send a message that such atrocities would not be tolerated in the future, and the trials also had an impact on post-war Germany, which I will talk about later, as they were seen as a way of holding the country accountable for the atrocities committed during the war. So to begin, we have quite a few judges, and the tribunal, which is the judges, was presided by quite a few people, which I have listed for you. So Francis Biddle, who was American, was a judge who served on the IMT at Nuremberg. And Biddle was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the U.S. and also served as the U.S. Attorney General from 1941 to 1945. At the Nuremberg Trials, Biddle was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. John J. Parker was a judge from the United States who served on the IMT at Nuremberg also. Parker was, again, a prominent lawyer and public figure in the U.S. and also served as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals. However, he did that for the Fourth Circuit. At the trials, Parker was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Edward Francis Carter was a judge from the United States who, again, served on the IMT at Nuremberg. He was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the U.S. and also served as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. At the trials, he was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Colonel Sir Geoffrey Lawrence was a British judge who served as the president of the IMT at Nuremberg. Lawrence had a distinguished career in law and was well respected in the UK. At the Nuremberg trials, Lawrence was responsible for ensuring that the trials were conducted fairly and that justice was served. Sir Norman Bricket was a British judge who served on the IMT at Nuremberg. Bricket was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the UK and also served as a judge on the UK High Court of Justice. At the trials, Bricket was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Now I apologize, I've tried to find pronunciations for this name and I have been unable to. So Henry Donadieu de Vabrez was a French judge who served on the IMT at Nuremberg. He was a prominent lawyer and public figure in France and also served as a judge on the French Court of Cassation. At the trials, he was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Robert Falco was a French judge who served on the IMT at Nuremberg. Falco was a prominent lawyer and public figure in France and also served as a judge on the French Court of Cassation. At the trials, Falco was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Major General Ionia was a Soviet judge who served on the IMT at Nuremberg. The general was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the Soviet Union and also served as a judge on the Supreme Court of the USSR. At the trials, he was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Volchkov, my apologies again, I could not find a pronunciation for that name, served on the IMT and was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the Soviet Union and also served as a judge on the Supreme Court of the USSR. He was responsible for prosecuting the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Now I would like to talk about the chief prosecutors of the trials, which includes 4 people. So to start off, we have Associate Justice Robert H. Jackson, who was a judge from the United States and had served as the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg. Jackson was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the U.S. and also served as a judge on the U.S. Supreme Court. At the trials, Jackson was responsible for presenting the case against the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Attorney General Sir Hartley Shawcross was a lawyer from the United Kingdom who served as the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg. Shawcross was Shawcross was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the UK, and also served as a member of the Parliament. At the Nuremberg Trials, Shawcross was responsible for presenting the case against the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. François de Menthon, later replaced by Auguste Chemtier de Rebs. Francois is on the left and Auguste is on the right, served as the chief prosecutors at Nuremberg. Both men were prominent lawyers and public figures in France and were responsible for presenting the case against the Nazi defendants and ensuring that justice was served. Lieutenant General Roman Andrakov Rudendo was a lawyer from the Soviet Union who served as the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg. He was a prominent lawyer and public figure in the Soviet Union and was responsible for presenting the case against the Nazi defendants, ensuring that justice was served. So the 24 Nazi government officials and organizations indicted by the IMT included Martin Bormann, Karl Donitz, Hans Frank, Wilhelm Frick, Hans Fritsch, Walter Funk, Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, Alfred Jodl, Ernst Kaltenbrunner, Wilhelm Keitel, Gustav Krupp, von Bohlen und Habeck, Robert Ley, Konstantin von Neurath, Franz von Papen, Erich Raeder, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Alfred Rosenberg, Fritz Sauckel, Jamar Schott, Baldon von Schrapp, Arthur C. Inquart, Albert Speer, and Julius Streicher. The organizations, which I will talk about later, involved the Gestapo SS, Reichskabinett, Leadership Corps of the Nazi Party, SA, SD, and the General Staff and High Command of the German Armed Forces. On October 1st, 1946, the tribunal convicted 19 of the defendants and acquitted 3. Of those convicted, 12 were sentenced to death, 3 defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment, and 4 to prison terms ranging from 10 to 20 years. So, as you may tell, here and there, some certain amounts of defendants may not add up, but many defendants, as did Adolf Hitler, committed suicide before being sentenced or tried. So as you can see, there are a number of organizations that were involved in the trials. So that includes starting off with the secret state police or the Gestapo. So the state police of Nazi Germany was responsible for investigating and prosecuting any opposition to the Nazi regime, including political dissidents, Jews, Roma, homosexuals, and other minority groups. The Gestapo had broad powers to arrest and detain individuals without trial, and it was notorious for its use of torture and other forms of brutality. So pictured, you can see members of the Gestapo. So next is the SS or Schutzstaffel, which was the protection squad, and it was a major paramilitary organization under Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, and was responsible for maintaining security within the Nazi regime. The SS was responsible for a wide range of activities, including running concentration camps and implementing the final solution. So members of the SS were known for their extreme brutality and violence towards Jews and other minorities. So we then have the Reichskabinett, which was the cabinet of Nazi Germany and served as the chief executive body of the government. The cabinet was responsible for implementing policies and laws and was headed by the chancellor, who was the head of the government. The Reich cabinet was made up of the members of the Nazi Party and was responsible for enacting many of the policies that led to the persecution and murder of millions of people. And as you can tell in the photo, this included Adolf Hitler, who was the lead of the government and the cabinet, or otherwise known as the Chancellor. So the leadership corps of the Nazi Party was a political organization in Nazi Germany responsible for promoting the ideology of the Nazi Party. The leadership corps was made up of high-ranking members of the Nazi Party and was responsible for recruiting and training new members. The leadership corps played a key role in spreading the ideology of the Nazi Party, including the belief in the superiority of the Aryan race and the need for their complete domination over other races. So the SA, or Stormtroopers, was also a paramilitary organization in Nazi Germany, also known as Sturmbannfeldern. My apologies for the poor pronunciation. So the SA was responsible for many of the violent attacks on Jews and other minorities in Germany and was notorious for its use of violence and intimidation. The SA played a key role in helping the Nazi Party gain power in Germany, but was later disbanded by Hitler in 1934. The Security Service, or SD, was the intelligence agency of the SS in the Nazi community. The SD was responsible for gathering intelligence, and they gathered intelligence on political opposition and other threats to the Nazi regime, which played a key role in the persecution and murder of Jews and other minorities. The SD was notorious for its brutal tactics, including torture and assassination. So the General Staff and High Command forces, on the left you see the General Staff, and on the right you see the High Command of the German Armed Forces, were the command structure of the German military during World War II. The General Staff and High Command was responsible for planning and executing military operations and was headed by Adolf Hitler as the Commander-in-Chief. The General Staff and High Command played a key role in implementing the policies of the Nazi regime, including the invasion of Poland and the persecution and murder of Jews and other minorities. So now we will be talking about the outcome, what happened to the... So now on to the outcome of the trials. So the trials were significant in international law and justice as they established the principle of individual accountability for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and the verdicts and sentences handed down by the tribunal were meant to send a message that such atrocities would not be tolerated in the future. The trials also had an impact on post-war Germany as they were seen as a way of holding the country accountable for the atrocities committed during the war. The trials were controversial at the time, with some arguing that they were not fair or legitimate. Despite these criticisms, the trials remain a key moment in the history of international law and justice and continue to be studied today. So the indictment for the defendants and groups was read on November 20th, 1945. The indictment was filed by the 4 chief prosecutors, which were mentioned before, and the jurisdiction of the tribunal included crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And crimes against humanity is defined by the MOT as murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, or persecutions on political, racial, or religious grounds. So as said, the indictment read convicted 19 establish individual criminal accountability for crimes under international law, putting an end to the idea of impunity for war crimes and crimes against humanity. They established the principle of equality before the law, which meant that all individuals, regardless of their position, were subject to the same laws and punishments. Finally, the trial established the principle of fair trial rights, which meant that defendants had the right to a fair and impartial trial, and that the prosecution had to prove their guilt beyond reasonable doubt. So the Nuremberg Trials also led to the passage of two laws in Nazi Germany in September 1935, known as the Nuremberg Laws. These laws embodied many of the racial theories underpinning Nazi ideology. The indictment of the 24 Nazi government officials and organizations was filed on October 18, 1945, as previously mentioned with the indictment. So the trials established the principle of individual accountability and paved the way for future war crimes trials. Despite criticisms of the fairness and legitimacy of the trial, the Nuremberg War Trials continue to be studied and debated today, and the verdicts and sentences handed down by the tribunal were meant to send a message that such atrocities would not be tolerated in the future, and that the international community would hold those who committed them accountable. The trials also established the principle of individual accountability, including the creation of the International Criminal Court, or ICC, which is responsible for prosecuting individuals for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The trials also had a significant impact on post-war Germany, including its legal and political systems. The trials were seen as a way of holding the country accountable for the atrocities committed during the war, and as a means of ensuring that such atrocities would never be repeated. The trials helped to establish the importance of human rights and the rule of law in the country's legal and political systems, and they have had a long-lasting impact on German society and culture. So despite the significance of the Nuremberg war trials, they have also faced criticism in recent years. Some have argued that the trials were not fair or legitimate and that they represented victors' justice. Others have questioned the retroactive application of international law and whether the trial set dangerous precedent for future prosecutions. These criticisms have led to continued debate and discussion about the legacy of the trials and their impact on international law and justice. So, just to give you all a brief summary of what we have covered, the Nuremberg War Trials were a pivotal moment in the history of international law and justice, and the trials aimed to hold the leaders of Nazi Germany accountable for their actions during World War II, including crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The trials were unprecedented in their scope and nature, and their legacy has been far-reaching. One of the most significant legal principles that emerged from the Nuremberg trials was individual criminal accountability for crimes under international law. This principle put an end to the idea of impunity for war crimes and crimes against humanity, and established the principle of equality before the law, which meant that all individuals, regardless of their position, were subject to the same laws and punishments. The trials also established the principle of fair trial rights, which meant that defendants had the right to a fair trial and impartial trial, and that the prosecution had to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Furthermore, the legal methods used during the trials were a mix of British and American legal traditions, and the decisions and sentences were imposed by a tribunal or panel of judges rather than a single judge and jury. This ensured that the trials were impartial and that justice was served. The verdicts and sentences handed down by the tribunal were meant to send a message that such atrocities would not be tolerated in the future. The Nuremberg War Trials also had an impact on post-war Germany, as they were seen as a way of holding the country accountable for the atrocities committed during the war. The trials were controversial at the time, with some arguing that they were not fair or legitimate, and that they represented victors' justice. However, despite these criticisms, the trials remain a key moment in the history of international law and justice and continue to be studied and debated today. The legacy of the Nuremberg War Trials has been far-reaching, impacting subsequent war crimes trials and continuing to shape international law and justice today. The trials established the principle of individual accountability and paved the way for future war crimes trials, including the creation of the International Criminal Court, or ICC, which is responsible for prosecuting individuals for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The trials also had a significant impact on post-war Germany, including its legal and political systems. The trials were seen as a way of holding the country accountable for the atrocities committed during the war, and as a means of ensuring that such atrocities would never be repeated. The trials helped to establish the importance of human rights and the rule of law in the country's legal and political systems, and have had a long-lasting impact on German society and culture. Despite the criticisms, the trials remain a crucial moment in international law and justice and a key moment in the history of the world, and the trials established the principle of individual accountability and sent a message that such atrocities would not be tolerated in the future. The judges, prosecutors, and defendants who were involved in the trials played a key role in ensuring that justice was served, and their legacy continues to be felt today. In conclusion, the trials were a landmark event in the history of international law. They established important legal principles and paved the way for future war crimes trials. The trials also had a significant impact on post-war Germany and helped to establish the importance of human rights and the rule of law in the country's legal and political systems. The Nuremberg War Trials continue to be studied and discussed today, and their legacy will be continued to be felt for years to come. So thank you all for listening, and that is all.